They'll hour for a minute or so, so you can sign off on the towers where they'll piss on your home. And if you feel like you're just powerless to answer them no, it's 'cause you are. They'll gladly pay you by the hour for a minute or so, so you can sign off on the towers where they'll piss on your home. And if you feel like you're just powerless to answer them no, it's 'cause you are. It's 'cause you are. They'll gladly stagnate a living wage, snap the chains, bury it. Labor slaves in rusty cages dragged behind a chariot, led by Mr. Racial Jungle, Joseph or Iscariot, fighting over scraps as they barrage us all with variants and BuzzFeed clickbait, straight until we're paralyzed, trying to distract us from the concentration camps that Joe had swore he'd close but only chose to amplify, where they got 50-something kids in cages made for 5 to occupy. And no, she hasn't seen the camps, but Harris swears they're paradise. She tells us the facilities are safe, and that right down to the women, they are regularly sterilized. Then she throws her head back and she proceeds to laugh, that sort of heartless cackle you'd expect from someone working steadfastly on behalf of the virus and a Congress full of parasites. And where was I? I was busy cashing every blue check, demonstrating plainly all the narratives expected from the verified. I was busy breeding verbal leeches by the terabyte. Train them to exsanguinate the wealthy while they sleep at night. Bleed the oil barons dry and barren. Say they showed us how to share and now we share alike. Tell them I contracted rabies from a feral mic. Now I'm just another species losing sleep to noise pollution and these glaring lights, forced to change its habits and adapt to just survive. But now it's safe to say that some of us are thriving in the moment, throwing shit on presidential homes beneath the Paris skies. So if you feel like you're just powerless, I guess you bought the lie. But I can tell they're petrified of our collective might, 'cause I can hear those gentrifiers weeping at the sight of our collective rights. And I only can imagine the intensifying fear of knowing revolution's near, and all that's left to do is simply wallow in the thick anticipation of a rabid bite. And baby, one day you can ask your leaders just what that was like before you grab a slice. So if you think you're powerless, allow me now to change your mind. Honey, if you think you're powerless, allow me now to change your mind. See, they'll pay you hourly, tax them each apart, and build a shining tower out of loopholes and cards, and tell you that you're powerless to keep you in the dark, because you aren't, because we aren't. You see, they'll pay you hourly, tax them each apart, and make you build a shining tower out of loopholes and cards, where they'll tell you that you're powerless to keep you in the dark, because you aren't, because we aren't. My lips, brand new taxes, starving all the billionaires and neutering their Visa Maxes. Topple Congress off their axis, mobilize the homeless, give them axes, call it praxis. Chop a couple limbs off the legislative branches. We'll show you the difference between air as a human right and guaranteed oxygen access. Octogenarians who barely know what day it is are culling countless citizens while sitting on a dais made of ignorance that was built on the graves of the slaves made to labor for its self-declared significance. And all to build a Congress full of millionaires who make their fortunes insider trading while they shit on all the indigent. So I got a bone to pick with our leaders, and I'll start with the ligaments. Pick right through the muscle, dig the marrow out, and serve it to the unhoused millions living in their minivans or watching their belongings get evicted from their tenement. I have a dream where we breach the walls of Congress and just let them in. And what happens next will survive in only text, cause there won't be any evidence. There will only be that heavy kind of feeling that pervades a space where there has been a reckoning and you can feel its remnants. Let any man who enters seeking power know that those who came before him suffocated on their eminence. That there once was a seal on the wall, but we quartered it and scattered all the pieces that it might prevent its semblance. And so we end the great experiment. We'll take all your billions, leave you 2 coins for the ferryman. Leave you drifting on a Dutchman floating derelict among the wretched seraphim. For holy is the hand that wiped the land clean of those who pose as gentlemen. That's my time, honey, cue the thunderclap and strike the theremin. And so we end the great experiment.
Maybe that's how it goes. We won't open our eyes, so we're the last ones to know. We're the last ones alive. Kept our enemies close. Wondered why we don't thrive while we're grasping at ghosts, counting backwards from 5. Counting backwards from 5. Counting backwards from 5.
Count back from 5. The theater on fire, the cast on strike. The studio stock starts taking a dive. The contract's tossed and they're gone with the tide. And the heads and execs, their hands are tied. We can't pump this track and treat you right. But what do you expect from the industry type who survive by the leeching of bodies and minds? From those who original thoughts never seem to find. So they're gonna reboot ALF before your wages rise. And it gives cause to pause and reflect on the times. If they're losing control of their fools and their mimes, when all those obedient actors who grew their careers by averting their eyes are now holding the line, along with the authors of countless scripts that strengthen.
There's a difference between peace and liberation, is there not? You can have injustice and have peace. Isn't that correct? Have peace and be enslaved.
Yes.
So peace isn't the answer.
No.
Liberation is the answer. Liberation.
great man, V.I. Lenin, at the turn of the century, wrote a book entitled Imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism. Is it? Imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism? Yes. If one would read this little pamphlet, one would see here that Mr. Lenin had precisely pointed out that all of the world had already been conquered and divided by colonial powers. There was no else in the world left to be conquered or divided by colonial powers. This is the time when Zionism comes to rise. Zionism comes to look for a state when everywhere else in the world is already dominated. Thus, in order for Mr. Herzl to get a country for Zionists, what he did was to attach himself to imperialism, British imperialism in this case, quite specifically. Of course, as an African who suffered under the heels of British imperialism, I can have no love for it, and certainly I cannot love anyone who attaches themselves to it and attaches themselves to it for the foundation of a state and then call this a liberation movement. Liberation movements fight against imperialism, not with it. The legal foundation of the State of Israel is what is known as the Balfour Declaration. This declaration was issued in 1917. A man in the government of Britain named Balfour wrote a paper and promised the Jews a national home. The national home he promised them was an area which Britain was colonizing, Palestine. Palestine didn't belong to the British. Just like Ireland doesn't belong to the British, even though they have troops there. But here, these British imperialists signed a note and gave it to the Jews and they accepted it. Where is the morality for this? If you say that Israel belongs to you, then you don't go to a thief to get Israel, you go and take it. Once you go to an immoral being such as British imperialism, and this is the basis for you getting the land, then clearly here those who are truly liberation fighters must question this. The basis, we say, is the Balfour Declaration, and Zionists know it. The Zionism is certainly not a liberation movement because it never fought against any imperialism. As a matter of fact, today, Zionism is the baby, child, and infant protector of imperialism in the Middle East. It carries out the interests of American imperialism. As a matter of fact, Zionism and American imperialism is like this. If our tax dollars would stop giving money to Israel, the state would sink tomorrow. And certainly no one can deny that American imperialism is the leading imperialist nation in the world. So we cannot see how a liberation movement is so tied, string and ham to American imperialism. They work hand in hand with American imperialism. Thus they can hardly be a liberation movement.
I mean, how ahead of his time was that entire...
This was probably in the 80s, given his hair.
Yeah. About 1983, you know.
Maybe.
But
share that around, folks, especially for your Zionist friends who think they have a claim to Israel, believing that they have a right to the land. As he said, as Kwame Ture said, if you're fighting for liberation, you're fighting against, well, he says imperialism, but you can put in any ism there. It will still apply. And funny enough, I was thinking about this because we were talking about this early in the week about two women, won't say their names here, who everyone's having a fight over social media regarding who's in the right regarding Israel. And given that clip, you can make the argument that neither of them are for it because they both have been complacent to their parties in varying ways. So even one, in my opinion, well, one is probably more obvious, obviously, but like the other hasn't done such a great job in making herself stand out that the one on the red is outflanking her, at least in rhetoric. So,
our enemies are all those in league with imperialism, the bureaucrats, the big landlord class, and the reactionary section of the intelligentsia attached to them.
right.
is John Candy wrong? No. First of all, very simple, you know.
Right.
Anyway, speaking of land, I feel like me and you have a similar thing this week again. We both
Sure.
kind
But before we
of,
do that,
yeah.
welcome to INN News. episode 196. Wow, four away from
200.
Wow.
Gotta find
So
a
that would
guest
be-
to come on, probably. We'll figure
Oh,
something
so that
out.
would be in June. That would be in
Yeah.
the middle of June. So I'm your host, Collin Radix-Carter, aka Care Bear. Welcome, my co-host, Reef Breland. I'm not going to give you a long intro this week. I don't have the time. Or
I'm tired. My body
Yeah.
weary.
my butt is weak. I had a long day.
Oh.
But yeah, we have stories this week. I think, as you said, a couple are very similar
Yeah.
to each other, and I think I think you kind of pulled for me.
Yeah.
But I thought this one, the one I'm going to do in a minute, is interesting. So, and this is I'm kind of speaking from a bias since I'm going to go to visit New Orleans later in the summer.
Hey.
But I mean, it's no coincidence. We know that, but I think we've talked about this regarding your home state. How
Not
eventually
home, but most of my family is there. So
well,
near
your
there.
Your current state of residence being underwater eventually. Well,
Yeah.
seems like New Orleans is at that point now where we will be underwater, which I think is very interesting. But I think that goes towards policy choices or lack thereof. And I'm sure you have a lot to say, given that you spent
it's
a lot
like
of time.
I didn't even read the article the other day, and you told me about this article when we were prepping, and I was like, "Oh, you mean how they never rebuilt the infrastructure to a level that could sustain the storms that will be coming and are coming?" And like
we'll get into that, but I think
and they just want to kick everyone out.
Right, it's climate change, but I think given what we saw with Katrina 20 years ago, that should have been cause to actually improve, as you said, the infrastructure, but not to the degree that they should to make it viable for people to live there. But now basically, we'll get more into it in a minute. But now basically, there's a study that has been put out that's basically saying everyone has to go within the next century. Otherwise, people are going to be, New Orleans is going underwater.
I think I remember covering a story a long time ago when it came to like water rising in general, especially in the Gulf states, right? That like people were already losing real estate and would lose, like there's going to be migration caused by that.
Right.
Like on a level people don't quite understand yet.
So we'll definitely get into it in a couple of minutes, but I'm sure you definitely have a lot to say, and I'm sure you guys in the chat will also have a lot to say.
We invested early. My house will be beachfront property in 5-10 years. It'll be fine. So, but anyway,
so we'll do that first, and then later on tonight. So this was actually kind of inspired from a conversation I had with, I'm not sure if it was a bot, didn't seem like it, but he says he was Black, okay. But him being kind of pissed, basically being like, just feeling as a Black man, allegedly, to immigrating the Supreme Court in Louisiana, backpedaling on voter rights. Well, no, actually, our federal Supreme Court did that, and Louisiana had their own thing regarding, redrawing maps and stuff. So congressional maps. So we're going to talk about that in terms of how Black people have been disenfranchised. The author is kind of speaking at it from a Republican lens. I mean, I feel that's half the story, because I'm sure Democrats have also done their fair share to disenfranchise Black people too. So we'll get into that critique later on tonight. And then what did you bring?
Well, I brought a story. Mainly, we try to talk about solutions here whenever possible, and we're always kind of in that cynical mindset of there's not a lot to do, you know. I'm going to talk about one of the things I think is something you can do, classically direct action, and who's doing it right now, and how you can support that. And I brought a story kind of in. I've had a bit of a marathon the last couple of weeks of imperial, ecological tactics. So we're going to talk more about Israel's ECOCIDE of its wildlife area that it supposedly wants to keep. They're not doing a great job. So, we'll get into that and the bullshit that goes along with that. But that's what I brought. So,
but before we start, pretty much everyone that I see right now is not new, but if you are, welcome. And as you know, YouTube hates us because we don't report on stories that are favorable to their algorithm as well as their ad sponsors. So they push us down just so you all won't watch us. And so you can give for YouTube. The only issue is they'll take 30% of your money. So for every dollar you give, they'll take 30 cents. No bueno. If you want to ensure that all of your money is able to go to us, so one, we're able to keep the lights on in terms of paying for the programs that we need in order to keep the show and other shows on the network running, as well as possibly helping our colleagues and maybe others, organizations to give. We're not at that stage yet, but we hope soon we will be. You can scan the QR code that you'll see right there on your screen if you want to support us financially, or you can go type in the Ko-fi link that you see at the bottom of your screen. If you're in the YouTube chat and we're live, you can type in !donate all one word, and the Ko-fi link will pop up, and you can donate as little as much as you want. Even if it's just $1, that will be a huge help to us. And like we always say, please take care of your families, your communities, yourselves first financially before you give to us. We know that times are rough. We know gas is up, food is up, all the things are up. You're trying to scrape by, so obviously, as much as we would appreciate you giving, we want to make sure that you're taking care of yourselves. Anyone who gives at any point will be on our wall. So thank you guys so much for your support over the last few years. Anyone who gives above and beyond will be highlighted in the page, as well as your name will be featured in our closing credits of the show. And so we hope to do more soon for our MVPs of this channel, as well as this show. And if you want to give, especially monthly, you can give via PayPal, Substack, Patreon. I'm missing one. Substack. There we go. All those links are in the description in case you missed it on screen. Thank you guys. We love you. I think we're about
50.
Less than 50 at this point in terms of hitting 3K. You guys have been killing it with subbing. So if you can help us financially, the free ways like sharing and subscribing. As I said, you guys have been really killing it in terms of subbing. We've been doing very well. So let's try and hit that 3K before the end of the month. I think it's very feasible that we should. So yeah, thank you, folks. We love you.
But I'm tired. My body weary.
Yes, my body is weary. So let's get into it. Ready?
Yeah.
All right. So our first story tonight, I came across this, I believe, on Twitter. Thought it was interesting. Kind of speaking from advice because I'm going to visit New Orleans over the summer. So it's no surprise to me that potentially within the next 100 years, they may not be in New Orleans to visit. What do you mean, Collin? So this is an article from The Guardian, written by Oliver Milman, who writes, Louisiana's cultural hotspot could be surrounded by the Gulf of Mexico before the end of this century, authors say. Titles the article, Point of No Return, New Orleans relocation must start now due to sea level, study finds. So Oliver reports, the process of relocating people from New Orleans should start immediately, as the city has reached a point of no return that will see it surrounded by the ocean within decades due to the climate crisis, a stark new study has concluded. Ongoing sea level rise and a rampant erosion of wetlands in southern Louisiana will swallow up the New Orleans area within a few generations, with the new paper estimating the city may well be surrounded by the Gulf of Mexico before the end of this century. Low-lying southern Louisiana faces multiple threats, with rising sea levels driven by global heating, compounded by strengthening hurricanes, also a feature of the climate crisis, and a gradual subsidence of a coastline that has been carved away apart by the oil and gas industry. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
South Louisiana is facing 3 to 7 meters of sea level rise and the loss of 3/4 of its remaining coastal wetlands, which will cause the shoreline to migrate as much as 100 kilometers, 62 miles inland, thereby stranding New Orleans and Baton Rouge, according to the study, which compared today's rising global temperatures with a period of similar heat 125,000 years ago that caused a rise in sea level. This scenario makes the region the most physically vulnerable coastal zone in the world, the researchers state, and requires immediate action to prepare a smooth transition for people away from New Orleans, which has a population of about 360,000 people, to safer ground. Louisiana has already experienced a population loss in recent years, and this trend will accelerate in a disordered way, the paper warns, should no action be taken to confront the perils faced by its largest city and surrounding communities. While climate mitigation should remain the first step to prevent the worst outcomes, coastal Louisiana has evidently already crossed the point of no return, added to Perspectives paper published in the Nature Sustainability Journal. A
What
Perspectives
slide are you
paper
on? Sorry.
Huh?
What slide are you on?
Slide 9.
Okay, weird. Sorry, continue.
A Perspectives paper is a scholarly article that provides an assessment rather than new data. Billions of dollars have been spent to fortify New Orleans with a vast network of levees, floodgates, and pumps erected after 2005's catastrophic Hurricane Katrina. But the growing threats to the city mean the levees, which already require hefty upgrades to remain sufficient, will not be able to save the city in the long run, the new paper warns.
So from my understanding, it was they essentially repaired what had been broken, right? To the level that it was
prior.
Before it was broken, which wasn't sufficient.
Right.
So, like, they're still rated for like a class 3 or 4, a lot of these levees or whatever. So, you know, like that's, yeah, they're talking about like they need upgrades, like, and long needed upgrades.
Right.
So,
but I would argue even, you know, you mentioned this, but even with like those upgrades, we're seeing more category 5s, which are what should be rare.
Yeah.
But more frequently, like within the last decade, we've been seeing category 5s. And obviously, those of you who watch the weather, you know, New Orleans is in a hurricane zone. So, you know, potentially if a category 5, which is likely to hit New Orleans, it could be devastating. And I'll argue, depending on how, you know, when the wind gusts are, like there may be a category over 5 at some point, potentially, depending on like how climate change is going to work moving forward. If we don't, well, I would argue probably, as the paper is saying, the damage is done already. Like we can't turn back from what we've kind of started, you know.
No, you could mitigate damage and possibly build infrastructure to keep it together, but you know, Like carbon scrubbing is a thing, though. They do think that's possible, but it's going to require like a Herculean effort, you know.
Right.
So of literally
Yeah,
scrubbing the air.
Right.
So,
But again, that's a policy choice.
Yeah.
Which obviously, given in the article, it says that a lot of this is tied to oil and gas, which the Republicans are well known to deregulate to all hell.
You covered an area near there too. What's it? Isn't it called like Cancer Alley or something like that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Probably like
it was like
about 2 months ago. I covered this.
Something like that, right?
In terms of the black community, in terms of the low income communities within the Gulf that basically are within those oil refineries. I believe it is in Texas.
Yeah. I think here too. There's but like around that area. I remember you having Louisianans in there.
Yeah. So yeah, if you want to find it, I forgot the name of that segment, but if you want to find it on a playlist, it's definitely there.
Yeah.
But anyway, I digress. In paleoclimate terms, New Orleans is gone. The question is how long it has, said Jesse Keenan, an expert in climate adaptation at Tulane University and one of the paper's 5 co-authors. Keenan said the time frame available to plan a retreat isn't certain, but it's most likely decades rather than centuries. Even if you stop climate change today, New Orleans days are still numbered, he added. It will be surrounded by open water, and you can't keep an island situated below sea level afloat. There's no amount of money that can do that. City, state, and federal leaders should begin work to help support people moving away from the New Orleans region in a coordinated way, starting with the most vulnerable communities, such as those in the Plaquemines Parish.
Yeah, Plaquemines Parish. Yeah.
Who live outside the levee system, Keenan said. New Orleans is in a terminal condition, and we need to be clear with the patient that it is terminal, he said. There is an opportunity for palliative care. We can transition people and the economy. We can get ahead of this. But, he added, no politician wants to give this terminal diagnosis. They will speak about it behind closed doors, but never in public. New Orleans faced obvious challenges. Situated in a bowl-shaped basin below sea level, the city already has 99% of its population at major risk of severe flooding, the worst exposure of any U.S. city, according to a separate study released last week. Even compared to all other U.S. cities, New Orleans really stands out, which is alarming, said Wayne Shao, a co-author of the study and a geographer at the University of Alabama. There is no specific time frame to how long New Orleans has left, but we know it's in big trouble. They're facing one of the highest sea level rises in the world, and I don't know how long human effort can fight against that tide. It's like a time bomb. Charles said she concurred that relocation of people would have to take place. I know it's a politically and emotionally charged issue. There are people with a deep attachment to New Orleans, she said. But managed retreat, no matter how unappealing it may be, is the ultimate solution at some point. A major pressure upon this southern cultural hotspot is that its surrounding land is briskly receding. Since the 1930s, Louisiana has lost 2,000 square miles of land to coastal erosion, equivalent to the size of Delaware, with a further 3,000 square miles set to vanish over the next 50 years. The rate of land loss is so rapid that a football pitch-sized area is wiped out every 100 minutes.
Yep.
To help counter this, Louisiana last decade settled upon a new sort of plan that eschewed building yet more flood defenses and instead sought to harness the Mississippi River's natural ability to rebuild land.
Yeah.
Levees and other infrastructure have, until now, straitjacketed the naturally meagering Mississippi and pushed the sediment it carries straight into the Gulf of Mexico rather than replenish the coastal wetlands. The so-called Mid-Baratia Sediment Diversion Project, which broke ground in 2023, would help restore a more natural flow in the Mississippi Delta and allow sediment to build up in coastal areas where it had been lost. More than 20 square miles of new land would be created over the next 50 years under the plan, the project estimated. However, Jeff Landry, Louisiana's Republican governor, scrapped the project last year, arguing its $3 billion cost was too high and that it fretted the state's fishing industry. This level of spending is unsustainable, Landry said at the time, adding that the project imperiled the livelihoods of people who have sustained our state for generations. Proponents of the project, which was funded via a settlement from BP, British Petroleum, over the Deepwater Horizon disaster in 2010, decried the decision as disastrous for the state, pointing out fishing communities will need to move anyway because of worsening erosion. Garrett Graves, a Republican former congressman who once led the state's coastal restoration agency, said Landry was guilty of a boneheaded decision that would result in one of the largest setbacks for our coast and the protection of our communities in decades. According to the new research paper, the loss of the sediment diversion plan effectively means giving up on extensive portions of coastal Louisiana, including the New Orleans area. A legal effort to force oil and gas companies to pay for damage to Louisiana's coastline, meanwhile, is also in doubt. This month, the U.S. Supreme Court allowed the fossil fuel industry to federally contest a state jury decision that Chevron pay $740 million to remedy harm caused to wetlands by dredging canals, drilling wells, and dumping wastewater. The combination of these decisions is driving a scenario where the state has stopped trying to build land, Keenan said. That just accelerates the timeline. They could be buying time, but that option is foreclosed now, meaning it's certainty the New Orleans levees will fail again multiple times. The floodwater will have nowhere else to go. While the U.S. had never wholesale moved a major city before, numerous communities have relocated for economic reasons in the past, with some now being shifted due to the climate crisis too. In Louisiana, the government could start planning and building appropriate infrastructure in safer places on the other side of Lake
Pontchartrain. Yeah, that one's tough. You know,
the largest estuary that sits to the north of New Orleans, Keenan said.
Yeah.
This could be an opportunity for New Orleans to help migrate people further north, invest in long-term infrastructure, and make that sustainable, Keenan said. That exodus has already begun, so if nothing is done, people will just trickle out over time and it will be an uncoordinated mess. The market will speak as people won't be able to get insurance. Louisiana has to stop the bleeding and acknowledge that this is happening, but at the moment, there is no plan. Timothy Dixon, an expert in coastal environments at the University of South Florida, who is not involved in the new paper, says the study does a nice job of highlighting the challenge Louisiana faces with subsidizing land combined with rising sea levels. New Orleans is not going to disappear in 10 years or anything like that, but policymakers really should have thought about a relocation plan a century ago. Dixon, whose own research has recommended a measured retreat from coastal Louisiana. Governments may not have the ability to just command people to leave, but people will volunteer to move, and we are seeing that already. I'm not optimistic our political system is capable of dealing with this stuff. It will take leadership and unpopular decisions. Also, many people don't want to move. They love where they are born. Landry's office was contacted for comment, but did not respond.
So I have this that might help people see. Did it load? No, what it did was do this. There we go. So this is like, so this is the way it is like now, right? This is 2000, right?
Right.
So this is the Delta. Here's New Orleans. Here's the river, right? And essentially you see all this like bright blue bits, right? Like this is, the sediment is literally just being pulled away from this, partially due to the river. The river's blasting a lot of it out, right? But like, you know, so you can see the sea level rise. Like New Orleans is gone.
Right.
So, you know, like it's on this little spindly little bit. That's what they're trying to hold on to, you know? So it's, you know, like, yeah, the other side of Lake Pontchartrain, right? You're heading up here. But like, bro, what do you think is north of New Orleans?
I mean, it's water.
Well, mainly a little bit of kind of land, but like,
Right.
I mean, like up in here, you're talking this whole swamps. Welcome to the swamps, right? Like that's
Right.
so development on that is awful, you know?
Right.
So, I mean, yes and no. Like, people are going to try to save what they can save and hold on to it forever, but, you know,
But
generally.
right, but that's in of itself the point. Is that, you know, like this is a policy. This is a political decision. And, you know, obviously, you know, big oil has a lot to do with it too, as we read.
Yeah.
But sometimes when you're in power, you have to make difficult decisions to help. Short term, it might be damaging, but in the long term, you know, it could save the people who you're supposed to serve. And the idea that even now, yes, like granted, people are not wanting to leave, especially given
Yeah.
what happened 20 years ago with the hurricane. Like, there is definitely an attachment there. But again, it's still the idea of, you know, Republican governments know about it, but they don't give a shit. They're just kind of like, die. But then
Yeah.
conversely, you know, like, this is kind of what I said last week. What are the Democrats doing? You know, like, why don't they have a strategy in Louisiana to kind of convince people, look, the reality is right now, New Orleans is going to be gone. Let's work together so that, yes, it's going to be hard, but let's try and find some alternatives for you in terms of if you want to live in Louisiana, we can help you. We can support if you need to move, we provide you with, you know, fill in the blank of what you're able to do, you know, but they're not going to get that kind of message because Democrats have no messaging at all. So there's not going to be a counter to what, well, I would argue Republicans down there are not saying is shit, you know, and ultimately when push comes to shove, who's this going to affect? Because the rich people can move easily, relatively.
Yeah.
It's the people that are going to live in the lower ninth ward, which is like the low income neighborhood in New Orleans. And
not much of that left.
Of course, that was the hardest hit by Katrina. They're going to be the ones that are going to lose everything, if not lose their lives.
Yep.
So, you know, so again, there's kind of the Black disenfranchisement that we're going to talk about that later, but that's who is going to affect first. Like, so, and I think honestly, you know, that may be part of the reason why nothing is being done. Because God forbid they want to help those blacks down there in order to secure a better life for themselves. Right.
Well, you remember the famous George Bush doesn't care about black people. So this is part of that. So, I mean, it's also just like the tourism aspect of New Orleans is part of that problem too.
Yeah.
Right. Where it's like, it's the state's kind of sole tourism income, you know, like no one's going to Baton Rouge. Sorry, Baton Rouge, you know, like no one's going there for Mardi Gras. No one's going there. You might have to when New Orleans is gone. Baton Rouge, you might be up.
But you know what? I think now it makes a lot of sense because I was talking to my neighbor, my friend, you know, we were just hanging out and he was like, hey, let's go to New Orleans over the summer when you're off. And I was like he's just kind of random like that. So I was like, okay, I'll look into it. And then, you know, I figured that, you know, like, because we will have to stay in a hotel, whatever. So I figured, you know, they're not going to be cheap. Like in the middle of the summer where you think that people, well, I guess it's hot. So I guess people are not going to be traveling like down there like that. But still, it was like $100 a night. And I was like, why is this so cheap? Like, I couldn't get, like, it costs more to fly down there than it is to stay there.
Yeah.
Like, that is wild to me, but it makes sense given the tourism, like, especially now they want to make it attractive for people to stay for a few days and party and like all that kind of shit. And like,
Yep.
so they have to make themselves viable on that regard, especially given the heat, especially right now.
Well, that's if you're
So,
going in the summer, that's where it's going to be cheap too. It's like, no one wants to go to the concrete hellhole, like, oh, is it miserable during the summer? You trying to walk the French, dude? It's rough. Like, bring your agua,
right.
So,
But funny enough, I was watching a couple of YouTube clips, maybe a couple of nights ago, where vendors were basically saying, yeah, like certain events like Mardi Gras, Essence Fest, like
yeah,
Southern
that shit's
Decadence, like all these
pricey.
big events, Jazz Fest, like it helps draw income for them.
Strawberry Fest, all that stuff.
So I think that's also part of the reason why there's a lot of these festivals and like events down there in particular, besides Mardi Gras, because they need that draw for people to come in order to help, businesses, local businesses especially, kind of survive down there. So it definitely does make a lot of sense. So, but of course, you're dealing with, I don't want to say natural because like this isn't natural, this is a man-made catastrophe by your own
Yeah.
hands, so I feel bad because these are people who are trying to make a life down there. They don't want to necessarily uproot themselves and kind of start over in a new place where it may not be as attractive, for people to come visit. But, again, within the article, but within the next 100 years, century, there may not be a New Orleans to go to.
Nope.
So it's a hard thing, but I think in this instance, you got to save people, but you got to make it viable for them to want to leave and give them the time to do it so that they're able to make those adjustments now before they have to uproot themselves immediately. God forbid if another Category 5 or worse hurricane is ever to hit New Orleans. Well, I'll argue that's going to happen sooner than later, I would imagine.
Yep. So I just say they just flood the streets and turn it into the Venice of the South. And then, put everything on stilts. Like,
but again, nothing's on stilts.
Like little P-rows like and French gentlemen with poles moving stuff around. So what? No? Venice of the South? No? Just me? Okay. Like, give the River Queen something to do again. Like, so, I don't know. Gotta do something, or build New Orleans above Lake Pontchartrain. Something like that. Just put a big bubble over it. Big old inflatable bubble.
It'll be interesting to see what happens in New Orleans within the next, I don't know,
decade,
50 years or so.
Yeah.
But as I said, this is mostly in my mind policy. These is choices that people in power are making or not making for their own pockets. Because again, I'm sure big oil is buying off these politicians for sure, in order for them to be like, nah, don't say shit to these people. Like, so again, it's going to affect the least of these who don't have the means to leave, that they're going to probably more likely suffer the most out of this. But talking about these stories is why we are heavily suppressed in the YouTube algorithm. So if you want more stories like this, and you want to support us in order to report on stories like this, you can scan the QR code that you see on your screen, or you can go to the Ko-fi link you see at the bottom of your screen If you're in the YouTube chat and you're alive, you could type in ! donate all one word, and the Ko-fi link will pop up, and you can give as little as much as you want, but any amount will help, even if it's $1. We appreciate any financial help you can give. And of course, we understand that people cannot give financially. We more than get that. So the free way, if you want to support us, is to like and subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to leave a comment. Just apparently that helps in YouTube recognizing that we're actually legit. And let us know what you think. What should people in New Orleans do right now? Like, in terms of the possible relocation that residents would have to make in light of this climate disaster. Let us know what you think in the comments. Help us get to 3K. We're about less than 50 away from hitting that. And thanks for watching.
To the chats, Boy Wonder. Cookie said, straight up Reef, what would be cool? New Orleans could be turned into the first underwater city. Dystopian future fiction BioShock already did that. Didn't work out well. Not fun. Like, it was either that or the city in the sky, and that didn't do well either. So, lose-lose. Louisiana in summer is like walking through a steam room in a cruise ship, and that's an understatement. It is fucking, that's awful. Humid as shit and gross. Yeah, I'm sure once my house will actually be beachfront property, they probably will raise all the property taxes. That'll be nice.
Right.
But no more Mardi Gras, no more boobs for beads. Now that'll still happen. Don't worry about that. Somebody will keep that shit up. Plus, technically, Carnival exists elsewhere, right? So, you're welcome to head down to Brazil
or Trinidad.
Yeah. See, all this stuff's coming for Caribbean too. Those aren't going to be sustainable, especially if water level rise and all that jazz.
Right.
Bigger and bigger storms. So, and this is just Mother Nature righting itself. Oh, too much carbon in the. Let's get rid of the parasites on us that are causing that. So that'll be fun. Elon Musk will probably be on Mars by then. So, with the rest of the billionaires. So that'll be fun. Have you watched The Expanse yet?
No.
You should do that. You should watch the first 2 seasons and come back and talk to me. It's very much like how that goes, like Amazon's actually in it. Great. It's essentially Earth, like the period of time where we're actually just starting to get outside our solar system, like that level of the future. So it's good. I liked it. Anyway, you ready to get to our next one?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Cool. So, hold on. Here it is. So, we've talked about Palestine action before on this show, Care Bear. We've talked about direct action before on this show. Tonight we're going to do a bit of both. So, this is from the Electronic Intifada, publication we've had on frequently. They write, direct action is a weapon of the people. This is John Sink, I hope is how you pronounce that. And we'll get into it. They write, on the 13th of February, the UK's High Court of Justice ruled that the prescription of Palestine action was unlawful. which we cover on this show. Palestine Action was added to the list of proscribed organizations in July 2025, a move initiated by then Home Secretary Yvette Cooper and passed by Britain's Parliament. In February, a panel of 3 senior judges allowed the challenge brought by Huda Amouri, a co-founder of Palestine Action, on 2 grounds. First, the pathway to reach the decision to prescribe was not in line with the Home Office's own policy. Second, a crucial ruling held that the ban under the Terrorism Act interfered with the fundamental rights of free expression and free assembly, yet the group remains banned pending the outcome of the British government's appeal. The government's challenge on the February ruling was heard by the Court of Appeal in April. The verdict in the appeal case is expected within the coming weeks. Paying no mind to the prescription, people from all walks of life have continued to show their opposition to the UK's role in the ongoing genocide of Palestinians and in imperial violence throughout the Middle East. It's clear beyond any doubt this Westminster failed at halting autonomous resistance or popular support for Palestine Action. Direct action is a political strategy with little regard for established pathways to change when operating with a political environment that fails to prioritize human life over the interests of global finance and decaying imperial order. Direct action is a weapon of the people. So, as they write this, I am currently incarcerated in the UK, accused of being connected to an action at Brize Norton, which saw 2 people enter a Royal Air Base and spray paint on Voyager aircrafts, which had been used to refuel British spy planes. The spy planes had regularly been seen above Gaza during Israel's genocide campaign and have more recently been used to support U.S.-Israeli actions on Iran and Israeli attacks on Lebanon. Yvette Cooper responded to the action at Brize Norton by announcing prescription. My co-defendants and I were arrested by counterterrorism police. We were held completely incommunicado for the first 48 hours. Now we all await trial in prison. And this is who? John Sink. Gotta remember the name. So we, John have already spent approximately 10 months on remand and pre-trial detention and face additional time if not granted bail. Under most circumstances, the limit on detention in police custody is 24 hours, and imprisonment without conviction should not exceed 6 months. Moreover, being imprisoned under the Terrorism Act subjects us to further surveillance and security measures while in prison. A Muslim co-defendant of mine held in the Wormwood Scrubs prison has recently been visited by counterterrorism officers and instructed not to speak Arabic or practice Islam outside of his cell. We are all subjected to legislation that is on paper the same. In reality, our treatment differs based in part on our proximity to contemporary stereotypes of terrorism. These stereotypes, created through mainstream media and the entertainment industry, are directly linked to the state's ability to disregard its subjects' claims to rights seemingly celebrated in liberal democracies. Freedom to practice one's religion is one of those rights. Contemporary domestic counterterrorism powers deliberately lack many of the safeguards that, however imperfect, exist under most other encounters with the state. I am being subjected to this firsthand. Globally, the so-called war on terror green-lighted torture and prolonged imprisonment of innocent people without any judicial oversight in places like Guantanamo or U.S.-run black sites. Terrorism, defined as the use of terror to advance a political or ideological cause, leaves out the reality that the colonizer or Western soldiers' act of terror are considered perfectly justified, no matter how brutal. For the colonized, any attempts at survival are quickly designated as acts of terrorism, regardless of the actual means of resistance. From First Nations on the American continent through Algeria to Ireland and Palestine, labeling occupied people as terrorists in an attempt to strip them of their right to govern themselves and govern their land. Palestinian children understand the meaning of terrorism far better than Shabana Mahmoud, the current Home Secretary, or Yvette Cooper ever could. They live through the terror of occupation day in and day out. The decision to prescribe cannot be viewed as an isolated instance of state repression. Countering so-called terrorism with all its material consequences has been deployed to stifle dissent throughout history. The meaning of terrorism has always been deliberately vague and often manipulated to fit the given ruling class and its ideological interests. The designation of Palestine Action as a terrorist organization was not an error in an otherwise well-designed system. It might have been an escalation, but nevertheless, it was one that is in line with the historical utilization of a broad range of counterinsurgency tactics against effective political movements. So while resistance to genocide and occupation never relied on permission from the courts, the ruling of Palestine Action's prescription as unlawful is extremely significant nonetheless. It is the first successful legal challenge to a group's prescription since the current counterterrorism powers came into force at the start of the century. The court ruling from the 13th of February isn't only a massive victory for the freedom of speech and right to protest in the UK, it challenges the state's hegemony on deploying counterterrorism powers as a tool to manufacture a climate of fear, to distract, to justify invasion or genocide, and in our case, attempt to make us into a deterrent. The past 10 months have seen a sharp rise in public critiques of counterterrorism powers, especially in the context of political repression, that has been made possible in no small way thanks to the campaign organized by Defend Our Juries and thanks to continuing resistance on the streets, on the top of weapon factories, and within prisons. Thoughts, Care Bear?
Well, I like that you chose it. I think you chose this for me because I complained to you. I mean, we had this conversation the other day. I think just even in our space, because, we talk a lot about, at least prior to Trump, oh, we need to do direct action and like all this kind of stuff. And right now, I mean, you can argue that the time is rich. Well, any time is rich for it, but I think especially now.
Yeah.
And people are not talking about it at all. It's more or less Trump this, Trump that, Trump that. Who cares? Like, we know Trump is bad, but the question is, what are you going to do to mitigate some of the bad, but then being able to take that regardless of who is in charge? Like, the presidents are going to change, but the issues are going to remain the same unless we do something about it. And again, it goes back to what Asad Shakur said. We need to, in order to organize, we need to be in community. It's not going to work if you're going to isolate among yourselves or within certain groups and not know specifically what your neighbors need or how you can care for them. You can't organize that way. So, but I think in this case, it's just a perfect storm of, Israel is just becoming so unpopular right now, especially among the youth, that it's just, I think it's kind of not an easy mark, but you're going to get that kind of sympathy. But I think something that I kind of noticed here that I think I'm going to address in my next segment is that they continue to get on the street regardless of what was going on. Like, I'll mention this in my next segment, but it's like with George Floyd and all of that, the moment that Biden got into power, everyone went home.
Well, and we've covered recently, them labeling Antifa and stuff as terrorism and whatnot, and the Filton 6 and all that legal battle and stuff, and RICO cases, and that's all this stuff too. They're trying to stop direct action from happening, and especially the direct action that actually takes on the war machine in whatever way possible. And we call for it, and I am in no way saying that there's not risks to that, especially for the individuals doing that. So, we live in difficult times. So, unfortunately. But
it's the idea that, you have to make a sacrifice in some fashion in order to do this work. And it could mean your life. And I think people are not necessarily, again, because people are so hyper individualized and they talk and so into self-preservation, I need to save my life. You're going to die anyway. The reality is, you're going to die of natural causes or whatever our government is going to do to you anyway. You essentially have to pick how you're going to go out.
Yeah.
Personally, I'd rather go out in honor in terms of fighting for my neighbor versus what the government will potentially do to me slowly. So I guess in a way it's a matter of picking your poison.
Yep.
But the thing that I do notice about Palestine action is that they didn't stop. Like, regardless of what was going on, they continued being on the street. They continued to push buttons, even if it meant like their own lives. They pushed forward and they won. And that's the kind of attitude that we need, not just listening to sweet nothings from a politician who will say, oh, like, if I'm in power, then you don't need to worry about this. And they get in and we can dust our hands and go home thinking, oh, it's over. And it's not.
Yep. I also think just in general, keeping your neighbors like survival at this point when they're actively trying to like poison everybody, like economically or whatever, keeping your neighbors afloat is going to be part of that direct action. So, but anyway, talking about these stories is why YouTube suppresses most of what we do. So if you want to, support us without YouTube taking a 30% cut, you can scan the QR code on your screen. Go to ko-fi.com/indie news network, or as always, links are in the description. And otherwise, just like and subscribe, share this video with your friends, and leave a comment. Let me know what you think. And thanks for watching. Mew. Cool. What does chat? How's chat holding up? Chat, you doing okay? So the Talking Wombat over on the Substack, the U.S. government only acts proactively for war. It will never relocate people until they are up to their fannies in flood water. And even then, they probably aren't. So, but anyway, what do we got on the YouTubes? Bad cookies. Although I don't think these direct actions have the intended impact, I wish them freedom and justice. If they don't speak out for those folks, who will? But that are purposefully mislead. So they sure are trying to stop direct action. They already defanged protests in my point of view. There are nothing but feeling parades anymore that are purposefully misleading direct action, like no King's marches. I mean, that's all like, we've talked about that on this show as well. So, I mean, that's, what do they call that? I mean, that's like COINTELPRO stuff. So, but anyway, Rumble's doing well. Nice that we're getting bots on Rumble telling us to, if you want to get more followers, do. Yay. Progress. All right, you ready for the next one? I'm ready.
Yeah.
Cool.
So kind of going into, this might fit well with your last segment. So, I think there might be a fight outside my house right now. Anyway, so if I might have to leave if something pops off, which can happen.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, so I was having a conversation with someone online over the weekend. Funny enough, his profile picture was of Huey Freeman from the Boondocks. Now, those of you who have never watched the film would know that Huey was like black radical,
Right.
like a la Malcolm X as a kid, Malcolm X type figure somewhat, or at least growing into that. And this cat was talking about how we need to support the Democratic Party because their policies kind of more in line with what he wanted, even though it's incomplete. So I was having a back and forth with this cat, assuming it wasn't a bot. I don't think it was. Over the weekend regarding, that we need to pick Democrats over Republicans and all that mess. But maybe I was kind of inspired by that, possibly. But in light of what's been going on in terms of the Voters' Rights Act being overturned by the federal Supreme Court, I thought this would be kind of an appropriate segment to talk about. This is from Truth Out, written by Austin C. McCoy. I believe that name sounds familiar. I think we've read his articles before. This is an op-ed that he penned for Truth Out, where he titles it, Black disenfranchisement has not been this intense since Jim Crow. The federal government is carrying forward a white nationalist backlash to the mass uprisings that took place in 2020, which I believe is very significant given what I said, but I do believe he's speaking from a slight bias in terms that this is a Republican problem. I don't believe it is just a Republican problem, but we'll get into that in a minute. Anyway, he writes, the Supreme Court's decision to invalidate Louisiana's congressional map, creating 2 Black majority districts, continues to remind us of how the U.S. has backpedaled away from the so-called racial reckoning of the summer of 2020. The Supreme Court ruling in Louisiana versus Calais undermines another key plank of the 1965 Voting Rights Act, passed more than 60 years ago with the intent of protecting Black Americans' voting rights and political representation. With SCOTUS ruling majority-minority districts as a form of discrimination against non-Black people, Republican-led states are poised to dilute Black political power in a manner echoing the Jim Crow era, when white Southerners retook power from elected Black lawmakers and neutralized Black Americans' voting rights for multiple generations. During Reconstruction, hundreds of African Americans won elected office as thousands of newly emancipated citizens engaged in the electoral process. The number of Black office holders declined following Reconstruction's end in 1877, when federal troops were withdrawn from the South. White supremacist groups like the KKK launched terror campaigns against Black communities in efforts to blunt Black political power. Many whites also Sorry, folks, I'm hearing might be
Voices.
a fight escalating. Yeah, it might be a fight escalating outside my apartment, so I hope everything's okay. But anyway, white supremacist groups like the KKK launched terror campaigns against Black communities in efforts to blunt Black political power. Many whites also justified their attempts at undermining Black power by claiming African Americans were corrupt and thus not fit to participate in self-governments. White theft of African American civil rights and economic power accompanied the destruction of Black political influence following the end of Reconstruction. White Southerners moved to pass laws instituting segregation in education, public accommodations, and in the private sector. Jim Crow laws also entailed enforcing policies preventing Black Americans from voting, such as poll taxes and literacy tests. One difference between the racial dictatorship of Jim Crow and the burgeoning racial regime is a contemporary manifestation of oppression is grounded in what sociologist Eduardo Bonita Silva calls colorblind racism, or non-radicalized actions and policies that reinforce Black and Brown marginalization. In 2013, Chief Justice John Roberts, writing for the conservative majority, justified invalidating Section 4B of the Voting Rights Act in Shelby County versus Holder by pointing to the greatest strides in Black participation in electoral politics. Justice Samuel Alito echoed Roberts in his opinion for Louisiana versus Calais. First, vast social change has occurred throughout the country, and particularly in the South, which have made great strides in ending entrenched racial discrimination. Oh, really? Okay. However, eliminating minority-majority districts threatens to leave millions of Black Americans without representation that reflects their interests. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed off on a new congressional map which could award up to 4 more GOP seats. Tennessee Republicans have drafted a new map that would eliminate the only predominantly Democrat and predominantly Black district. Alabama Governor Kay Ivey's call for state Republicans to revisit Alabama's map is striking because she is framing her actions as an attempt to regain in compliance with the law. Again, this ruling allows Republicans in states to disenfranchise Black voters under the guise of following colorblind law. SCOTUS's decision is the latest in a series of rollbacks in civil rights not seen since the post-Reconstruction era. Since Donald Trump has returned to office in January 2025, his administration has sought to eliminate any policy associated with addressing historical instances of racism. The administration's attack on diversity, equity, and inclusion policies has led to historic job losses for Black women. According to economist Katia Roy, more than 319,000 Black women lost their jobs in 3 months last year in 2025. Many states, especially in the South, continue to wage a war against Black history, especially the aspects of it that challenges myths of colorblindness and white innocence and victimhood. After complaining about how anti-racist activists had tried to erase history by tearing down Confederate monuments during his first presidency, Trump's federal government continues its efforts to whitewash history, from its unsuccessful attempt to remove mentions of George Washington enslaving Black people at Independence Hall in Pennsylvania, to reinstating names of military bases named after Confederate generals. This follows the ongoing assault that Republicans and higher education administrators in Florida, Texas, and Alabama have waged against DEI programs in education and the teaching of African American studies, race, and gender studies. These attacks on anti-racism descend from the lost cause myth that emerged in mid-Reconstruction, which erased slavery as a cause of the Civil War and instead emphasized how the Confederate South fought valiantly to defend states' rights. Diluting the Voting Rights Act, attacking Black history and employment, challenging birthright citizenship legalized in the 14th Amendment, another pillar of Reconstruction policy, and eliminating immigration from less desirable countries in Latin America, Africa, and the Middle East are all part of this administration's strategy to maintain the United States as a white nationalist country. The Great Replacement theory animates these attacks as many Americans believe that people of color threaten to overrun the U.S. and oppress white Americans. Like white reactionaries in the South attacking Black Americans' freedoms and white Northerners' defense of segregation after the Civil War, this administration's efforts to curb Black political and economic power and immigration are a backlash to the global racial justice uprising in response to Breonna Taylor's and George Floyd's murders by police in 2020. The 2020 protests represented everything that many white nationalists feared: a multiracial, multinational, and working class movement against police violence, racism, colonialism, and capitalism. It seems that a new political majority seeking a long overdue reckoning with the histories of racism and settler colonialism was on the cusp of formation amidst the rebellion. The backlash to the anti-racist conflagration emerged soon after the summer of 2020. Believing that anti-racist education projects like the 1619 Project lay at the foundation of the rebellion, Trump tried to undermine it with the 1776 Project, which asserted a whitewash and American exceptionalist interpretation of U.S. history. Attacks on critical race theory and DEI efforts followed and continued after Trump left office, as right-wing activists like Christopher Rufo waged a cultural war against anti-racism. Democrats like then Republican and now Virginia Governor Abigail Spanberger and President Joe Biden criticized calls to defund the police. Biden called for funding law enforcement, further undermining one of the main demands of 2020 demonstrators. So I take back what I said. Obviously Republicans have a hand in like rolling back a lot of this stuff, but again, Joe Biden, when responding to, George Floyd and all of that, he basically gave us Juneteenth.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like a symbolic gesture, but nothing of substance to protect Black people in terms of the police state. So, which Trump is making now his fighting force now. But anyway, resistance to this racist regime may start in a manner similar to Black Americans resisting Jim Crow and structural racism in the North during the 20th century civil rights movement, and the organizing that laid the foundation of the 2020 protests. Local people resisting colorblind racism and organizing protests and movements against the structures of white supremacy. Minnesotans have demonstrated the power of collective solidarity and community defense while resisting ICE and Custom and Border Protection attempts to round out immigrants. And as John Stewall and Ann Kosef Jones wrote in January for Truthout, Minneapolis anti-ICE resistance would not have transpired without the city's 2020 racial justice uprising. Collective political education is once again relevant as state legislatures and the federal government have sought to ban Black history, ethnic studies, gender studies, and other disciplines critical of settler colonialism, imperialism, and capitalism. Political education programs such as Study and Struggle and efforts such as the hundreds of Black churches creating history programs to educate their communities are great examples of critical education capable of countering right-wing propaganda about race and racism, gender, war, immigration, and capitalism. Studying how power operates, organizing tactics and strategies, and history of resistance also prepares us for confronting and defeating authoritarianism. The only path to stopping this regime from completely disenfranchising everyone, but at its most privileged adherents, is to make good on the longstanding calls by Black activists like W.E.B. Du Bois, MLK, Angela Davis, and groups like the League of Revolutionary Black Workers and the Black Workers Congress to transform U.S. society. We also learned from the range of abolitionist organizations and formations in the Twin Cities fighting against state violence like Black Visions, Reclaim the Block, the Minnesota Immigrant Rights Action Committee, and a recent collective opposition to ICE that we cannot reform ourselves out of structural racism. The structure of white power that can rear its monstrous head in response to racial justice movements must be destroyed, and a new, more just and equal system must be built in place. So, again, I appreciate the sentence regarding Joe Biden, but it needed more than a sentence, like in my mind. Like, in as much as Democrats, as much as Republicans are to blame, obviously, for a lot of this, Democrats also have a hand in what is happening now, if not doing enough, or kind of overstepping, as we saw post-2020, overstepping what Black people wanted. And Joe Biden basically was like, nah, I'm going to fund the police more. Like, I don't need to do anything in regards to, all the uprisings that we saw, in 2020. And as I said, people were, I wouldn't say organizing. It was more disorganized, if anything else. But people were out on the street, during 2020, obviously in light of Trump. But as I said earlier, the moment that Biden got into office, people thought that we are done and went home. And we didn't see many of those protests again up until October 7th, given what happened to, Palestinians and Hamas and all of that kind of stuff. So again, the message is clear to me. It just seems like, and I will say this, I think Black people especially dropped the ball on this in terms of, number one, believing that Biden could do something when his history has proven otherwise, that he's not really interested in Black liberation in any sort of way. Number two, and I'll say that not to you guys necessarily, but I strongly believe that white people need to be better allies to non-white, and in this case, Black people in particular, only because I feel like, and especially now in the age of social media, like, we tend to ride a trend, especially more of a political sort, because it's trendy, you get to be seen, kind of protesting and all that. And then once you believe you're done, you wipe your hands off and go home. And meanwhile, as I said, because you're not in, and I will argue, and this was the argument that I had with this guy. He was like, "Oh, if you're white and educated, you're less likely to be racist." Which I was kind of like, less racist doesn't mean not racist, because I know plenty of educated people who are covertly racist. They're just better at hiding it. So, and I think especially like, I feel a lot of the problem is, especially with white people who may live in proximity of Black people who might be doing well somewhat, that they feel like, oh, because this Black person seems to be doing okay, then everyone else must be doing okay. And then once they consider their job to be done, as far as being out on the street for maybe like a rally, they think their job is done. And meanwhile, like the true grassroots organizers who have been working tirelessly like this whole time, one, do not get any recognition at all, but more importantly, continue to do the work alone in the dark without any media attention at all. And those people are the ones that usually are the canaries in the coal mine to kind of call out the inaction, in terms of our oppression. And people are just like, fuck you. Like, we don't want to hear this from you now. So, again, it's easier to kind of call this out with Trump. But Democrats should be called out more for their inaction to follow through on the policies that they claim that in the way that they care about Black people, especially given that we overwhelmingly support the Democratic Party, with our votes. Any thoughts?
A bunch. Just trying to figure out how to parse it mainly. If our system, especially the electoral one, was built in a way that actually allowed change, I'd feel like this fight for like non-gerrymandered districts would be more important. That makes sense? Like this whole thing of fighting for voters' rights when clearly that's not the power you should be fighting for at this point. Like, you need real power outside of that. Like, I don't know, that's it partially. It's like when you're talking about, the Democrats should be called out more. I almost wish people would just ignore both of them. Like, they're not really the ones in power. Like, they're both sides of the same stenographer book. Like, the real ones are Palantir and the actual corporations and imperialist nonsense that are still doing all that shit,
Right. Well,
like
let me
deciding
just
that shit.
clarify. When I say called out, I feel called out in terms of, I feel a lot of people, not necessarily us, but other people kind of downplay.
Oh,
like,
no, for sure.
Inaction.
Right.
And it's like, but almost to the point where it's almost justified that their actions are seemingly legit because people have just such a low opinion of government anyway, that any sort of crumb is considered good.
I sent you.
That's what
I sent you. What did I send you today? The whole thing. I used to actually argue with people in good faith and try to like convince them, but I've realized they're all stupid, evil, or propagandized, or all three. Like, that's where I'm at with a lot of that shit. I'm just like, they're stupid. I'll wait till they figure a bit of it out. So.
Right. But again, I think a lot of this is we're so hyper individualized in our society.
Yeah.
We are almost propagandized not to care.
Right.
Or be indifferent. No, actually, not care. I don't think that's not fair. I think more indifferent would be a better term.
Yeah.
To other. Like, especially like other being in a different walk from life from you. So someone like me who all my life, for the most part, has lived in proximity to white people, especially, you would think that someone like me would believe or kind of act in a way, and given my circumstances, I'm glad it's not the case, that I would be more of a shit lib, really, in terms of like how I respond to the world, in terms of my I can't even argue I have that much status, but like given my position in the world, that I should be able, and the thing is, I understand myself well enough to know the danger in thinking that due to being in proximity of these people. But at the same time, I'm also grateful for the opportunities that I've had professionally, personally, and otherwise to know better. So so in a lot of ways, and I think Indy and I have talked about this quite a bit, in a lot of ways, we're kind of traitors within our own class in a sense, because we're not meant or not supposed to speak up and out against our own peers politically. We're supposed to kind of be quiet and just kind of be like, yeah, we can take pity on them, sure, but not necessarily do anything to offer help or support or advocate or anything like that, unless you're doing it for a job where you're kind of, almost trained to do that. But but being in our positions that we're trained just to kind of keep ourselves away or isolated from those people, so that you would never truly understand what they're going through.
Right.
And thus not having that kind of perspective of, when we're fighting for more universality of policy, that we're thinking about them. And that was actually the issue that I had with this person online. It was the idea of me saying that I'm a teacher. Yeah, I concern myself about my students primarily, but the way I operate, I think globally in terms of the needs of all children. And he kind of downplayed that, basically being like, well, you're not helping all children, so like you're just talking shit. Which I'm like, no. Like, my job forces me, and I guess in the mindset that I have, it forces me to think, if I'm able to do this stuff for my children who are privileged, then every child should have this capacity to do what they're supposed to do in an ideal world. That's what I'm fighting for. Like, and those are the things, again, that we all should be fighting for. Like, the ideal can exist if we work hard at it. If we kind of, and that means, I think, even for us to not be as cynical, I think a little cynicism is okay. But at the same time, it's like the idea of like, how can we use that cynicism to kind of fight for the true change that people deserve? So again, it is in the mindset of thinking beyond yourself, which I think people are kind of indifferent to doing these days.
Sure. You have this to finish it out with, right?
Yeah. So this is from Breakout News, but again, I think
Breakthrough news.
I just kind of wish, yeah. But what she's saying here, I think, is very important. I think just in terms of thinking about the universality of our cause and how our disenfranchisement within my community is also parallel to other communities, especially the Palestinian community, and how they are tied together. So this is kind of the way I kind of think of things, is my liberation, again, is tied to the Palestinians. It's tied to the Africans. It's tied to the people in the global South. Like, I cannot operate here in good faith, comfortable, knowing that my brothers and sisters across the world are not living a comfortable life either. That to me, and I think just given to my experiences, I cannot think that way as a human being. That's just me. But let's hear what this queen has to say.
Okay.
Go ahead.
supremacy has infiltrated the black community with a narrative that what's happening in Palestine don't got nothing to do with us. And that is a lie from the pit of hell. I'm saying that as a Christian. Because see, when a black child is shot on the south side of Chicago or killed, it gets reported like just a number. It gets reported like they're reporting the weather for the day. And that's exactly what's happening to the Palestinian people. This is about human rights. And for the black community, I want to say this and I want to say this clear. The very things that are happening in Palestine is where they train police forces that come into our community and treat us like we are an apartheid state. In the hood. It's where they test out the surveillance equipment that is currently being used to surveil us in the hood. It is a testing ground for our oppression. So while we are being told by white supremacy that this don't got nothing to do with us, it's just injustice coming through a back door. And it's time, let's go. It's time for Palestine to be free. It's time for us to be free. And the truth of the matter is, we ain't free till we all free. I want somebody to say that with me. Say, we ain't free till we all free.
We ain't free till we all free.
Say, free, free Palestine.
Free, free Palestine.
Say, free, free Palestine.
Free, free Palestine.
Don't hear that perspective from us that often. So I thought it was perfect to kind of end this.
Yep.
But again, it's still the idea of our liberation is tied to the world stage. You know? So and I think it's very easy to kind of talk, kind of keep it within our own communities. And again, as she was saying, it has nothing to do with us. When really that's a bold-faced lie. And I'm sick and tired of black leaders and black people especially thinking, oh, we don't need to care about the people in Gaza. Oh, we don't need to care about, well, actually they'll throw this out. They'll be like, well, you talk about Palestine so much, why don't you talk about what's happening in Congo? What's happening in Yeah, let's go off. Let's talk about that too. And how you haven't mentioned it. You know? Like, so yeah, but again, it's the idea of human rights. And we've talked about this before in terms of like who gives us our rights to begin with. And that's what we need to be very careful about. Whoever gives it to you can very easily take that away from you. So even within our Constitution, like who created like rights to begin with? The establishment. And the establishment are the ones who kind of gatekeeped this rights forever until they were like, oh, well, you know, we need to keep these black people in line. So let them just have a little bit in order to make them feel satisfied so they can leave us alone. And now we got a little bit and we're actually trying to get a little bit of power for ourselves, is that they start taking it away. And I don't think we think about that often. We think, oh, once we got it, we got it. No. Like, that's why you always keep saying, like, if you get a little something, you have to keep on these people's necks to ensure that it stays in place or build upon it. Which often than not, when we feel like, oh, we get a little bit, we kind of go home and let that policy or let that law, whatever, just dissipate. You know, because these people are always thinking like, how can we break this down if we give it to you? So we need to be very conscious of that. And I think that's kind of where we kind of fault ourselves, is believing that once we got it, it's locked in. It never is, because it's the establishment that gives it to you. Like, it's kind of like the saying, you know, like that your parents might say, I brought you in this world and I can take you out type of deal. It's like politicians might say, I can give you this right and I can take it away from you just as easily. And that's what they're doing right now. So that's what they've been doing, in all honesty. So I think that's something we need to be conscious of that and be mindful of that, especially if people are planning to organize around these issues. Is that, as Kwame Ture says, organizing is eternal. Like, it's something that never stops. because it's still the idea that these are human beings that give you these things to begin with, and these same human beings, or like powers that be, have the ability to take that away from you at any point, no matter what. So that's why what makes it eternal, especially within this system. And until, as you said, it's liberated to the point where we don't have to worry about that you have these rights just given on the idea that you're human, which we're not at that point yet, if at all, then this is the thing that we need to be mindful of.
Yep. Anything else you wanted to add?
There's a difference.
Donate, all one word, and the Ko-fi link will pop up, and any amount as little as $1 will help us keep the lights on here, as well as to help us pay our bills to support this channel and this show. If you cannot give it all, we more than understand. The free way, and probably the best way, is to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Check, because YouTube often just kicks people off their subscription, so make sure that you are subscribed to us. And let us know what you think. Do you really think that Black enfranchisement is merely just a result of you can make the argument for Democrats, but Republicans primarily just trying to roll back a lot of the policies that Black people have fought for this country forever, or is it something else? And should we really be thinking in terms of the universality of human rights versus just what's comfortable for me in terms of my position and our self-preservation? Doesn't need to be necessarily about Black people, but just anyone in this country in general. Let us know in the comments what you think, and help us get to free K. We're under less than 50 away from that milestone. And thanks for watching.
So, cool. So, don't worry, I fixed the audio. I got it. It took me a second. You got to realize that the multi-action button you hit also kills the audio, because that's what happens when you end a show. You kill the audio. That's what happened. But I got it. I fixed it. Always something. I feel like we need to make a law that's like Murphy's Law, but like whenever you do a stream, there's always at least one thing going to go wrong. And if things go right, that thing that went wrong is inconsequential. That's what you hope. So always something. There's always something that's broken. So anyway, let me back up. I did see some ones.
Okay, 45 away.
Cool.
45.
Collin, the Democrats will always feel like they are the de facto vote for Black folk, but whenever Black folk hold out their votes for not being treated fairly, the true colors of those folks come out. The better you than me attitude sounds very American.
Yeah.
So, Victoria Day for the Canadians is coming up, I think. What is that celebrating, I wonder? Queen Victoria, I would imagine?
Possibly.
Or is it like Victory Day, similar to like the Russians just celebrated theirs, right? So
let me look that up. Victoria Day in Canada is celebrated each year on the Monday on or before May 24th. This date was the birthday of Queen Victoria, who was Queen of the British Empire, and for that reason, the Sovereign of Canada, as well as the time of the Confederation. Since that year until 1952, Victoria Day was a national holiday. Yeah, so
Queen Victoria.
Basically.
Yep.
So just part of the empire.
Hey man, a 3-day weekend. Take it. I mean, we could be doing a lot better than a 3-day weekend, but you know, cookies. Then a Democrat will come in, reverse all of this, and they'll look like heroes until people get sick of their shit. Then they unleash the Republicans on people again. Like, it's like when you were talking about how like the Democrats are to blame or the Republicans are to blame, and it's like, honestly, I kind of feel like neither at this point. You know, it's like
pendulum swing.
It's like but it's like it's not their fault. The politicians are just signing. Well, I mean, they're also complicit, but you know, it's like they're really not the ones making these decisions.
Right.
You know, that's the dichotomy I'm stuck in, you know?
Right. Well, it's the idea, again, Juneteenth, the idea that just seemed to go through and Republicans didn't have shit to say.
It's all kabuki theater.
Right. That
Like,
you knew that was planned. It was like the corporations were basically like, give them this because we want their money.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just think about that. Go back to like
It's all
2021.
PR.
Was. Like, yeah, like no Republican had an issue with that. Okay. At least politicians, like people like Ben Shapiro did, but like no politician had an issue with that, or barely any. Like, okay. So,
yep. So, anyway, you ready to get to our last one?
Yes.
Cookie's telling us best of luck on our push to 3K, and that we have a very clean, no-loss stream. It somehow managed to work out this time, didn't it? Knock on wood, you know. So
did you yell at
nope.
Xfinity or whoever?
I reset my routers. I have 2 of them, and I forgot that I should do the second one. So, plus I think they actually did come out like recently because it was like storming and stuff. So that might have helped some things. But our last story this evening, Collin, we've been talking about like Israel using natural disaster essentially to further their empire quite a bit. But there's more news in that genre of dystopia. Bezalel Smotrich orders the uprooting of 3,000 Palestinian trees in the West Bank. So just get rid of them. Don't eat them. You know, like this is from the New Arab, Israel Palestine News, compiling that for us. And they write, Israel's far-right finance minister, Beelzebub Smotrich, ordered the 3,000 trees planted by Palestinians in the northern occupied West Bank be uprooted to clear the way for a new Israeli settlement. Smotrich, who holds a ministerial role with the defense ministry, said the trees were removed on Wednesday by the civil administration, a branch of the defense ministry's coordinator of government activities in the territories which oversees civilian affairs in the occupied territory. We are building the land of Israel and destroying the idea of a Palestinian state, Smotrich said, reiterating his long-standing anti-Arab, anti-Palestine rhetoric. It's nice that they're just at least honest about it in the open, you know?
Sure.
So, like, destroying the idea of a Palestine. So they're over their idea of the 2-state thing, huh? Good to know. He claimed the trees had been planted illegally and said the operation was intended to prevent attempts by the Palestinian Authority to establish facts on the ground. What? What does that even mean? Like, according to Israeli media reports, the trees have been planted across around 50 acres of land near the Shikak Industrial Park, close to the Shukhed, a settlement in the northern West Bank, before being uprooted. All Israeli settlements are illegal under international law. However, Smotrich has continued to push for the expansion of them, despite growing criticism of Israeli uprooting operations and home demolitions across the territory. It's just like ironic as shit that he's like, oh, these trees are planted here illegally. It's like, bro, all of you are illegally settling this country. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Right. Anyway, Israeli soldiers also uprooted hundreds of olive trees near the Palestinian village of Kiryat, I hope, south of Nablus in December 2025. Haaretz reported, at the time, the village council warned that the aim is to take over our land after the Israeli military ordered the removal of what it described as, quote, excess vegetation. Residents expressed concern that many of the trees have been destroyed and could not be replanted again. Israeli forces have also justified similar uprooting campaigns following attacks involving settlers. So the settlers have been doing this too, essentially, going around to farms and just removing the farmed item, essentially. But after a shooting near the settlement outpost of Adiad last August, the army said it had uprooted more than 3,000 trees in the village of Al Mujahir in the Ramallah Governorate, as part of alleged efforts to locate the assailant, including uncovering vegetation, arresting suspects, and searches. Rights groups, including Yesh Din, condemned the latest operation following Smotrich's announcement, with the state supports hundreds of illegal outposts which constitute focal points for severe violence by Israelis against Palestinians. It compounds one crime with another. By cutting down thousands of olive trees just because they belong to Palestinians, and thereby does mortal damage to the income of thousands of people, the organization said. The Israeli military has uprooted olive trees, a key cultural and economic symbol for Palestinians, across the occupied Palestinian territories for decades as part of a broader policy linked to land confiscation and the displacement of residents. The latest development comes as Palestinians continue to face escalating violence against the West Bank amid Israel's genocidal war on Gaza and the Iran conflict. So, Collin, in our story earlier, you talked about how they're forcing Louisianans out of their land by just destroying the environment around it for decades. You know, yeah. Well, funny where Israel gets it from. Yeah. So Israel's war on the West Bank comes for Palestinian greenhouses. So not only are they not allowed trees, they're not allowed greenhouses or farms to grow their food on. So, like, Hakim Salim stood in his pepper greenhouse on the lands of Jayus, a village east of Quiquila, whose farmland lies partly in the so-called theme zone, the strip of West Bank territory caught between the Green Line and Israel's separation barrier. Building the nursery cost him more than $10,000, with tens of thousands more invested in prepping the land. A typical greenhouse in Jayus generates like 50 to 60,000 shekels annually before expenses. For Salim and his brother, that income supports their families and helps pay for their 4 children's university tuition. So if 30,000 is 10, 50 to 60, you're looking at like 20, right? So 20,000 a year. Now, however, a recent stop work order issued by Israel's civil administrations threatened to wipe out everything Salim has built, along with his family livelihood. Now, however, a recent stop work order issued by Israeli civil administration threatens to, we just read that, didn't we? The civil administration and army arm of the military says the greenhouse was built without permits, even though they have stood for many years, some for over 2 decades. When the greenhouses were built, there was no problem with the army. Nobody came and said, don't build here, Salim told 972. The municipality even connected them to electricity. They like hooked up the water and the lines, like, you know. Salim is far from alone. In recent weeks, Israeli authorities have issued stop work orders, the first step before demolition, for 52 greenhouses in Jayus located east of the separation barrier. At least 2 of those have already been demolished this week. Dozens more greenhouses located on the other side of the wall also received demolition orders. So, and I know there's some Israelis who've always had this thing about, well, we gave them greenhouses, right? They destroyed them. No, you motherfuckers are destroying them again. Like, again. This is also, keep in mind where this is. They've mentioned it like a couple of times, right? This is like the green line, right? Like, so they have the separation barrier, and then in front of the separation barrier, they have like the wall of death, and then, you know, no man's land, and then the, you know, green line, right? So they're talking about east of the green line, they're destroying things. Does that not sound like advancement to you? Like,
yeah,
that's what it sounds like to me. So, you know, I would love to be wrong. So the fact that this order applies to structures within 300 meters on either side of the barrier and cite no specific security rationale suggests that their goal is to clear the area of Palestinian agricultural presence altogether, which you could just say Palestinians. So at that point, they harass us, the villagers, so that we'll move to the cities and from the cities abroad. Sound familiar? This is the plan. We've talked about it for a while. No one's doing fucking shit to stop it. Would love to be wrong on that too. Like, fuck, man. Guess what? In Syria, what do you think they're doing over there? That's the other front. Same shit. Growing agricultural damage. Right? Continue to regularly enter Qunecha government on patrol, setting up checkpoints and harassing locals. They do the same thing here. Force of 8 IDF military vehicles also deployed in the Daraa governorate over the past 24 hours, setting up operations near the main bridge in Al Rocket Valley. Exactly what the intentions of the deployment remain unclear. So, damage to their farmland. So they're building IDF constructions on farmland. Like, they're doing the same shit. Like, and we'll still be told that we're liars somehow. They continue to do the same things. We say that and they go, no, that's not what it is. Fuck you. Tired of this nonsense, Care Bear. I'm tired. My body weary.
But I'm tired. My body weary.
Like, God. Anything you wanted to say?
I mean, again, I don't get it. Like,
yep.
You're trying to, are you trying to make the region a wasteland? Like, because that's what's essentially what you're doing. And again, I do not know the science of how you can, like, build or fix or repair, whatever you want to call it, like, once you essentially destroy the vegetation on the land. And especially, like, given how the vegetation has been around for generations, like,
right.
You would think that they'll have some type of reverence that they want to at least maintain that. But they're like, fuck it. We're just going to take that too. Anything association with Palestine, we want to get rid of.
Yep.
Even down to maybe like the bugs. Like, we want to get rid of it all. Like, yeah, it's just like, what world are you trying to create out of this? I have to wonder.
Well,
like,
in the words of Carlin, who I think it was his birthday yesterday, today, something like that.
Planet isn't going anywhere. We are.
Like,
Oh yeah.
it'll be us that'll be going away. So,
Right.
you know, but anyway, talking about these stories is why YouTube has shadow banned us completely. So you're welcome to, you know, donate to us without them taking a 30% cut by going to ko-fi.com/Indie News Network or scanning the QR code you see on your screen now. And, you know, like, subscribe, share this video with others. We need more people to see it so that they subscribe and so that we can get to 3K. So share this video and leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Otherwise, thanks for watching. That's it. That's our show.
That's it. That was your show this week.
Yep. We made it. By short, Collin means 2 hours on the dot, practically. So literally, I just looked at how long we've been streaming. It was like, yep, 2:20. It was like 2:10, 2 hours and 10 seconds. I was like, Jesus, how did we manage that? So I think Indy's got stuff going out over this week, even though he's traveling. So he was nice and prepared that all for you. So make sure you stay tuned to the channel and watch all your news you could possibly soak in. What else? I don't know if he'll be back by Sunday for boats, and we skipped last week, but there's a wealth of boats if you want to go back and watch. So I think I'm almost on episode 200 of it. So, but yeah, and he said nothing tomorrow night, so take a day off. Anything else you want people to know about? Cool.
No.
Oh, well,
thank you all for watching.
Okay, and he said yes, boat Sunday. All right, crack the whip, why don't you? God, fine, we'll do stuff. God. Anyway, remember, labels are bad. Stay independent. Good night for real this time. Good night, everybody.
Have a good week, everyone.
There's a difference between peace and liberation, is there not? You can have injustice and have peace. Isn't that correct? Peace and be enslaved.
Yes.
So peace isn't the answer.
No.
Liberation is the answer.